Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're delving into a story that's as grand as it is grim. The final, chilling days of one of history's most formidable monarchs, King Henry VIII. We often remember him as the powerful, larger-than-life king who broke with the Catholic Church, married 6 times, and executed anyone who stood in his way. But the end of his story is a far cry from the vibrant, dominant figure we see in portraits. It's a tale of physical decay, mental anguish, and a court paralyzed by fear. Imagine a king so enormous he could barely walk, a man whose presence once commanded absolute authority but now repelled those around him with the stench of his own decaying body. This was the reality for Henry VIII in his final years. His reign, which had begun with so much promise, was now spiraling into a dark and unsettling conclusion. So, how did the mighty king who reshaped England fall so far? Stick around as we uncover the haunting details of Henry VIII's decline and death, a story far more compelling and terrifying than you might think. Let's start with his physical state. By the time he reached his 50s, Henry was a shadow of his former athletic self. In his youth, he was celebrated for his skill in jousting, hunting, and tennis. But a jousting accident in 1536 left him with a severe leg injury, a wound never properly healed. For the rest of his life, he was plagued by festering, ulcerated sores on his legs. These wounds were not just painful, they were grotesque. Courtiers reported that the smell coming from his legs was so foul it could be detected from several rooms away. This constant pain and infection confined him to his chambers, often rendering him immobile. He had to be moved around his palaces using a device we would now call a kind of early wheelchair or pulley system. His weight ballooned to an estimated 400 pounds with a waist measurement of over 54 inches. Modern historians speculate he may have suffered from a combination of conditions, including type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and possibly even Cushing's syndrome, a hormonal disorder that can cause rapid weight gain and mood swings. This physical torment was a constant, humiliating reminder of his own mortality, a concept that terrified a king who saw himself as second only to God. But the decay wasn't just physical. Henry's mind was also a battlefield. He was a man haunted by the ghosts of his past. Think about it. This was a king who had ordered the executions of 2 of his own wives, Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard. He had beheaded his closest advisor, Thomas Cromwell, and his lifelong friend, Sir Thomas More. He had turned against cardinals, dukes, and countless others who had once been in his inner circle. Many at court and across England believed that Henry was being punished by God for his actions. They whispered that his physical suffering was a direct result of his spiritual corruption. Whether he believed this himself is up for debate, but it's clear his final years were marked by intense paranoia and fear. He grew increasingly suspicious of everyone around him, seeing plots and conspiracies in every shadow. His temper, always formidable, became explosive and unpredictable. One wrong word, one misplaced glance, could lead to imprisonment or even execution. The vibrant, boisterous court of his youth had transformed into a place of silent terror, where courtiers tiptoed around the ailing king, desperate to avoid his wrath. This atmosphere of fear created a profound sense of isolation for Henry. Man who had once been the center of a dazzling court was now largely alone, surrounded by people too scared to offer genuine comfort or companionship. His once mighty presence became something spectral and chilling. Instead of a king, his subjects saw a tormented, decaying giant, a walking embodiment of power gone septic. Imagine the scene: the great halls of Hampton Court or Whitehall, palace once filled with music and laughter now hushed and tense, waiting for the next royal outburst, or the next groan of pain from the king's private chambers. It was a living ghost story, playing out in real time at the heart of the kingdom. The end finally came on January 28, 1547, at the Palace of Whitehall. Henry's death was as unsettling as his final years. As his condition worsened, his doctors and courtiers were too terrified to tell him that he was dying. It was considered treason to predict the king's death, so no one dared to utter the words. Finally, one brave courtier, Sir Anthony Denny, leaned in and informed the king that his end was near. The accounts of his last words are shrouded in legend and hearsay. Some say he muttered, "Monks, monks," perhaps a reference to the monasteries he had dissolved, a final cry of guilt or defiance. Others claim his last coherent utterance was a simple, fearful, "All is lost." When asked if he wanted a priest to administer the last rites, he initially refused, only asking for Archbishop Thomas Cranmer. But by the time Cranmer arrived, Henry had lost the ability to speak. The archbishop asked the king to give a sign that he died in the Christian faith. Henry, summoning his last ounce of strength, supposedly squeezed Cranmer's hand, and then he was gone. The most powerful man in England died not with a roar, but with a silent, desperate grasp. Even after his death, the strangeness continued. Henry's enormous, lead-lined coffin was transported to Windsor for burial. Along the way, the procession rested for a night at Sion Abbey, one of the very monasteries Henry had shut down. During the night, the coffin somehow burst open. According to contemporary accounts, the next morning, dogs were found licking up the king's remains from the floor. For many, this was a moment of divine retribution, a grotesque final judgment on the king who had defied the church. And what of his final resting place? Henry had planned a magnificent tomb for himself and his third wife, Jane Seymour, at St. George's Chapel in Windsor. But despite the grand plans, it was never completed. His coffin was placed in a vault alongside Jane's, but the grand monument he had envisioned was never built. For centuries, the grave of one of England's most famous kings remained unmarked and unfinished. It wasn't until the 19th century that a simple stone slab was placed over the vault, finally marking the spot where he lay. This unfinished legacy adds to the chilling aura surrounding his death. It's as if his turbulent life was too much for history to neatly contain. Over the centuries, a strange mythology has grown around his grave. There have been reports of strange phenomena in St. George's Chapel, whispers of a restless spirit. Some have claimed to hear the groans of an agonized man or see a large, shadowy figure limping through the chapel late at night. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, these stories speak to the powerful, unsettling impression Henry VIII left on the world, an impression that lasts to this day. So the story of Henry VIII's end is not just about the death of a king. It's a cautionary tale about the corrupting nature of absolute power, the inescapable reality of human frailty, and the long dark shadows that guilt can cast. The vibrant, tyrannical king was ultimately brought down not by an army or a political rival, but by his own body and perhaps his own conscience. His end was a slow, agonizing descent into a personal hell, a chilling epilogue to a life lived at the extremes of power, passion, and brutality. It serves as a stark reminder that no matter how high one climbs, no one escapes the final judgment of mortality. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the chilling end of Henry VIII. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the darker side of history. Let me know in the comments what you think. Was it divine justice or just the sad, inevitable decline of a sick man? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious.